Good afternoon, everyone. I was just saying it gets very quiet as the hour approaches, and since we have an extra minute here, we'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone in the council chambers and those watching us on Rogers Cable. Having called the meeting to order, I'm just going to ask you to join with us in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? I'm seeing no indication of any. Just a reminder that you can declare it at any time it becomes evident. Public participation today. First of all, members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must, however, be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released. Members of the public who wish to make a deputation about a specific agenda item at the meeting must register in advance with legislative services by 4 o'clock the day before the meeting. You contact the deputy clerk at meaford.ca or 519-538-1060 extension 1100. Presentations are limited to 10 minutes and deputations to 5 minutes. There are no presentations today, I don't believe, and nor are there any deputations on agenda items today. So the next order of business is approval of our minutes. I ask somebody to move and second putting that on the table. Thank you very much. Seconded by Liz, and all in favor. I don't know if we actually have to vote on that. It's on the, okay, all in favor, and it is on the table. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we haven't. I'm ready to hear any changes you have. We just had to get it on the table there legally, and any comments on the minutes? Okay. Oh yes, we should have had your microphone on, and everyone, it's the right button. This is a little bit. We've been upgraded to better seats, and so there's a little learning curve here. So what you were saying is that there's a slight adjustment needed to the minutes, and has our clerk sort of registered that? Okay.
I can give you this after if you'd like. Okay.
Sure.
I don't know. Is that
Yep,
on?
you're on.
Okay.
You look for the
Same number 8. Vic Mitchell inquired about the status of work to bring the shear down sign into compliance. I just wanted to add in there, including the potential for assistance from the municipality in terms of the SAT grants, because on the record, I don't want this to appear as if I'm coming down on shear downs, but I think we should support her in any changes she needs.
Okay, and that's I think duly noted. Great. So all in favor of approving these minutes? Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Liz. Yes, the right hand button. You see the red light, and you're in business.
Brand new here. In number 8 as well, committee inquiries. We had quite a Q&A session going on at our last meeting in September, and there were a lot of questions that are still floating out there, and I wondered if there's a way that we could have those issues addressed.
I think that we in our agenda, I was thinking that committee inquiries is probably the appropriate place. Do you have a comment on that, Mr. Voigt?
Not knowing which questions you're referring to, I have no comment. So the minutes are as they are. And if you have other things you want to bring up, I believe the chair is correct in saying that there's an opportunity in today's agenda to bring that up. So I think that's perhaps a bit of a reset, if you will. It's been many months, and that was if I recall correctly, a far-reaching discussion about many different things. I think some of them were also, as we talked about, of interest to the committee, but outside of the scope. So it was very conversational that way. So I think that's why you're not seeing them reflected. I'm just guessing in the minutes that way.
So does that mean that we can talk about this in the committee inquiries?
Yes, I think so. And the only thing I would just, because I don't think I've informed just about everyone on arrival, but we are not able to discuss amongst ourselves in a public meeting the case that is before the Ontario Land Tribunal at the
Yes.
moment. Okay. So can I have a vote then on the accepting the minutes of the last meeting on September 14th? All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. The next item is heritage permit applications. And we'll need this is for 12 Nelson Street, a non-heritage building demolition. So can I have a mover and seconder to get that on the table? It's moved by Councillor Greenfield and seconded by, I've got a whole bunch of new names now, while I know them well, Mr. Sullivan. I'm used to seeing a councillor at each of these places. And so the recommendation is that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend approval of a permit for demolition and removal for 12 Nelson Street as per the policies defined in the Heritage Conservation District Study Plan and Guidelines, specifically section 4.9.3, demolition and removal of non-heritage buildings and structures. So we're open for discussion on that. And I just might tell everybody at the first, I was thoroughly confused by this because my knowledge is that this building sits on fronts on Collingwood Street, but evidently I'm told that the entire Market Square, the address of it is 12 Nelson Street. So that was news to me. But what wasn't news to me was that that building played a fond role in my life when I arrived in Meaford, because it was the band hall, it was the practice hall and the concert venue for the Meaford Citizens Band, which was the first of many wonderful things that happened to me when I first arrived in Meaford. So, discussion? Vic?
Actually, first thing, it's semi-related, but the appendices that the heritage assessment property came from, I had downloaded those in 2015. That file in particular was corrupted, and I can't seem to find them anywhere online. Hope that the committee could get access and list all the different.
Yes, I could not find them either.
So just something forward. I have a question about the term minor or ancillary structure when it comes to this building. It's supposedly what they're recommending is tearing it down and not rebuilding anything. And under the plan, that's only for a minor or ancillary structure. And as you pointed out, that building has been in place for many years as a kind of band shell, a stage basically, and it's been used as recently as the last few years. And more than a century ago, there was some kind of gazebo there that, housed bands as well. And if it's not a minor or ancillary structure, it's supposed to be rebuilt in some form within 2 years of being torn down. And I think that should at least be considered by council when they're deciding to tear this down, that this might be replaced by something that serves the same purpose that it has served for many years.
And if I can comment here very quickly, the council has had some discussions, I think largely in terms of our priorities for this term of office, along the lines that we would like to see the Market Square greened and to have or at least what we hear is that the best approach to a performance venue is to put infrastructure in the ground, because many bands, when they arrive, erect their own stage. So that I think part of our thinking is, can we get the infrastructure in the ground at the right location? And whether this is the right location or not, I don't know. But I think, and I'm going to invite Mr. Voigt to speak here about, I think that we only are thinking of this demolition in terms of improvements and greening of the Market Square. Is that, and then I'll go around the horseshoe here. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
Rob,
that's-
but
and this is through the chair. This is one of those things because it is related to one of council's, what I'll say, tentative priorities they've identified, because council's not finally adopted the list. If I recall correctly, it's somewhere between 14 and 16 projects across the next 4 years. One of them is identified as a reestablishing of the Market Square and all the things that could mean. And I think given the characteristics of this advisory committee, it kind of makes sense, because that is it's a public space that has, over time, we've kind of lost our way in how we've been using it, right? It's now just a parking lot that we sometimes transform into something else. And I think council has recognized that that historically we kind of had it right. And maybe now there's a modern day interpretation of what does that public space look like. This building that is before the committee right now, in terms of what you're being asked to approve, really is the first step of that. I think as the member mentioned, that it makes sense that council perhaps looks at what it gets replaced with. Again, knowing that Market Square project likely will maintain as a priority of council. And so, but there are no answers to what that would be. And of course, that's not before the committee right now. I think it's fair to say, not speaking on behalf of a council, but having been in those strategic planning sessions, by making note of that to the council, it's not going to be news to them, right? That, like, I believe everyone on council kind of gets it, the importance of how that entire space, its relationship to Meaford Hall, all those things would be in consideration.
I guess my question, just from a procedure standpoint, or from on the basis of the plan, is we have, for non-heritage, there are two things. If it's minor ancillary, it doesn't need to be replaced. If it's not, it should be replaced within 2 years. And do we have any definition of minor or ancillary in that context? I mean, it's definitely smaller than the hall, which is the address it is, but
Through the chair, I can't think off the top of my head. I didn't look at that, but the fact that if we look at the, and by the way, we'll see about getting you a copy of the heritage assessment report, the entire thing. You know, it's made clear that, you know, it's not only has no heritage value, no heritage characteristics, and I think you'd make, you know, yes, used as a stage at one point in time, but that building has arguably no architectural value either, and it is, as used, very ancillary in that sense. I don't see anything in terms of what's before the advisory committee here that would say through a demo permit you could force council to build something here. That's not up for question, and replacing this building or anything like this building would, quite frankly, I think, damage the heritage district, because there's nothing architecturally about this that would speak to, like, it would fail 100% if you brought forward, I want to build this thing where the roof is sort of a stage, et cetera, and all that. this is, quite frankly, it's landfill in the shape of a building. No,
You know, understanding and going forward, it would be interesting to have these terms a little maybe better defined. You know, I've got the picture in front of me here, and that's a historical association, not known, character conflict, no, but you know, just working under the plan would be good to what we're working with going forward. And so I can see a shed or something, obviously, that's a big part of what I guess. That's all.
Yep, sure. Other questions, comments, Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks, Mayor Kendall, and thanks, Vic, for those comments. That's an interesting slant. It's perhaps council has had a bit of a head start on this entire market square situation. Certainly, as Mr. Voigt commented at our strategic priorities meeting, the market square was, well, I think next to Airbnbs, maybe the most discussed subject. We do have very early plans for regeneration of the market square, and the removal of this building has to do with maybe a chance, hopefully a chance of this becoming a greener area than it is, a more people place. I think there was even a suggestion maybe there might be a replica of the fountain in the market square. Anyway, that's for the future. As far as the bandstand providing a stage for entertainment, council has approved in its budget the purchase of a portable stage. That's the best way I can define it. That may indeed be able to answer the questions for a some kind of a stage for later events. I'm quite all right with taking this building down. There are water problems there. There are moisture problems. But I guess when I look at this building, I don't really look at it as a heritage building. I mean, there aren't the bricks, there aren't the high windows, there aren't the recessed doorways in that I perhaps incorrectly, but usually think of as a heritage type building. But it does have immense heritage and historical importance to me. The cement blocks that this structure is built of, I would guess, were manufactured at Ormsby Concrete Products, which is now the home of the SOS storage and the factory outlet. Ormsby Concrete made concrete products there from the late 1940s to the mid 1980s. The band, as Ross mentioned, we had a very famous band, and the Kentner name was well associated with the band, especially back in the
There were three of us.
in the 60s. It was I knew it as the Meaford Citizens Band. They won a number of provincial awards going around the province, certainly to the CNE. So that has, there's heritage there as I'm concerned. The building itself, when the fastball park was there when they used to play ball there. There used to be bleachers along the first base line, the third base line, and that bandstand was kind of Meaford's green monster. As in Fenway Park, because if you hit a ball to the bandstand off the stage, that was a home run. So there's history there, there's heritage there. So it's difficult for me to say bring in the idols, but I think when we're talking about the future, not necessarily for me, but for my ancestors, for my grandchildren and everybody's younger generations, I think council has an idea in mind that is actually going to improve on that situation. And I think this is one of the first steps. So thank you.
Anyone else have questions or speak? Sure. Go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say, it's sad, but memories aren't heritage, which is sad, really sad. You know how strong I promote heritage. But honestly, it is the entry, it's sort of the heart in a way of Meaford, and it does need a little bit of sprucing up. And the building really, as a visual for people that don't have the connection back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, the building is just a white thing. And if the blocks, I don't know if it's possible, but if the blocks are recyclable, if there were something or anything, maybe they could be incorporated somewhere else. I don't know, but really, you know, I think it's practical to let council have this venue that they can change and make the heart, the little heart section there in town into something really pleasing.
Mr. Sullivan.
I think the Heritage Committee should be very pleased to have a councillor and a mayor who actually lived the history. So I'll take that into consideration. Just a couple of things. I'm glad to hear that it will be a market square. And coming up with a plan maybe prior to the demolition might be a good idea, but I can understand, I agree with this committee. If they would choose to demolish it, I wouldn't object to it. I don't see a reason to keep it as far as heritage values go. But this is the second building in the Heritage Conservation District that's been brought to council for their demolition approval before being received by the Heritage Committee. And pre-approval by council for demolition is contrary to the Heritage Conservation District Plan and the Heritage Act. So I was just wondering if there was some way that this could be avoided in the future. It's just it's frustrating for a Heritage Committee to receive the information secondhand after council was already voted to demolish it. And now we get a request for a heritage demolition. I don't know who I could ask about that.
Well, let's ask Mr. Voigt if he can explain it, how this came about. It's
through the chair. So there's been no votes as such on the demolition. Council through their asset management planning and their budgeting process, because that happens yearly, needs to be able to budget for things accordingly. So while the final approval, there's an application before the town. There are plenty of communities, I don't think it's correct that they do this, but there's plenty of municipalities that don't require themselves to have applications for things. That happens all the time. It's kind of crazy. We actually follow the rules. Is it textbook the way we would like to see it, as you're suggesting, that first it comes to this committee? Well, then quite frankly, then we would be pushing it off and would have to then go into a different budget cycle and all that. The reality is council has to deal and manage a corporation that has a budget over $30 million and needs to address things. And they're not going into this blind. Again, the heritage study says this has no heritage value. We're not it's not the heart attack that I'm sure some saw when they saw the address that this is not Meaford Hall.
No.
This is it has the activities that happen there are the great history here. This building, let's be honest, is an eyesore. And if we look at the reports there, it's actually a public health hazard. People should not be in there. So I get the point, but there's been no kind of superseding the decisions of the committee.
That's okay. Would it be possible then to have input from the committee for the next report that goes through for the next time something like this comes up? Would that be possible?
I think partly what you're addressing, Mr. Sullivan, is the fact that it's not the only one on our agenda today. Like I know there'd be some discussion about the freight shed at the harbor, and again, so it's looking. I think it's just a matter of the optics here, and you have refreshed my memory. I think that council is entirely culpable here, and it's simply because we have a vision to try and restore the market square as a green space going forward, and so that's how the cart got before the horse, if I can use a heritage expression.
I don't have a problem with the demolition. It was only the way it was brought to us after it had already gone to council. That's all.
Liz Harris?
Yeah, just to kind of add to that. This is an eyesore, this building, there's no question about it. And yes, it is full of memories and full of music and full of old clothes and full of all sorts of mold and everything else. But the vision, which I believe council is going to go through a visioning process, there should be a future vision for this space. And one of the things that I would request, and I don't know what the time frame is for demolition, but because we're coming into the summer season, hopefully there is a plan in place to throw some sod down or something that would just kind of cover up the mess of what is going to be left behind if in fact it gets taken down before the summer season.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, the light's right here. Through the chair, yeah, in the background, it identifies the demolition will begin in June and is projected to take approximately 5 to 10 days. There's also a note that relates to section 4.93 dealing with demolition under C, that the Heritage Advisory Committee, in this case the municipality, but through the advice of the committee to council, may attach conditions requiring the kinds of things that you just noted in terms of the site preparations afterward. And so in fact, the recommendation is that I'm seeing here that the application submitted by the municipality identifies that the subject site is to be adapted for use as either parking or green space once demolition is completed, and that's on the application, which is Appendix 1. And it would be appropriate for the Heritage Advisory Committee to recommend placing a condition for the site to be remediated as green space or a parking area after the demolition as per that guideline C. So that's identified as one of the recommendations that you have within your authority, and that would be then when you are voting on moving that recommendation to include that condition as well.
One other thing, sort of going back to when the existing library, that site was torn down, there was a mural that was on the wall, on the opposing wall, and we had talked that had come to this committee, and it had been discussed that there would be a mini version of that St. Paul's Hotel would be put on the library or in the library, something like that. So on that same vein, what I'm thinking is because of Midas Mart and the number of years that the Kiwanis Club put into that area and the amount of dollars that were infused into our community because of Midas Mart. And now Midas Mart obviously has now been transposed into the Rotary Thrift House. I'm wondering whether, because of the band shell and all the memories in there, if we could maybe think about putting in a heritage plaque that would incorporate what the building was. You know, we have another plaque on Main Street that identifies what that area is, but maybe that could be part of it, so we don't lose the memory of that building, ugly as it is, but maybe just don't lose.
I
that
think
memory.
if we're looking for a way of sort of memorializing the uses of the market square, there are excellent pictures extant of band tattoos and of fastball games. And you know, there could be a plaque that just had a couple of pictures that showed the multiple uses, and the Midas Mart too, you know. I mean, and mentioning the Kiwanis Club, the Meaford Citizens Band, and what was the name of the ball club? They became the Meaford Orphans in Toronto, but they were a very, very, you know, highly regarded club. Anyway, does anyone want to move a motion to attach something like that to approval? So you may have to get a little help from Alex there to frame something, but I think that would be good if she could help us on that.
So we're wanting to preserve.
Not, well, I think the artwork really pertains to Trowbridge Street, but this one, I think we really need to identify the Kiwanis Club, because they ran the Midas Mart for a number of years out of that facility, which enabled a lot of our citizens to have clothes on their backs. And it was with a very sad heart that they had to close that building down. And they were absolutely thrilled to death that Rotary took over the thrift store, and they've been involved with that very deeply. So I think there should be an honorarium of some sort, a plaque that honors the fact that this is what they did. And the amount of money that, and I have no idea what the total is, but they did infuse a lot of money into the community.
We're wanting to add a condition to add an honorary plaque for the Kiwanis Club in your project.
And could it be with a band shell as well, that just the memory lane plaque? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Through the chair. This discussion is going very far afield beyond what is before this committee. We're talking about honoring events that are important to the community. Fine, not part of the management and preservation of the heritage district. You're also talking about things that could be arguably part of a public realm and public art program, also not related to the mandate of this advisory committee. None of those things are, not to say that they're not important, but they are not connected to the application that's before the committee. So I just am suggesting that while you may choose to recommend attaching those kinds of conditions to this application, I would advise that may not look to council and the community as being furthering the business of this committee. It's some great intentions, but really it's not what's up for discussion. And I can't see how you can even attach such a condition to this, quite frankly, but
we can attach a condition that says the site will be sodded after the demolition.
yes, it says under C of that section I mentioned before, where the heritage permit application is for demolition of a minor ancillary structure, and there is no need or requirement to build a replacement structure. Appropriate plans or drawings shall be submitted with the heritage permit application to show the finished surface treatments, blah, 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 blah. Where such information is lacking, the municipality may attach conditions requiring such matters to be addressed and subject to consequent approval. So it's under that you can do that. Commemorating things that are not identified in the Heritage District Plan.
That's,
I think for the argument's sake then is what if someone else has really big feelings about an event that happened last week and wants to commemorate that? I
So-
think you're going down
Yeah.
an interesting path.
I think we can leave that in council's hands as they proceed on the Market Square, the total project. So, so can we just have the motion include sodding the site after the demolition? Beg your pardon? Oh, sorry. I'm just suggesting that we do include a motion that asks that the site be sodded after the demolition, so that at least it is greener than it was.
I can make that motion.
Okay, is there a seconder? Ms. Harris, all in favor of the motion? That is carried. And are we ready to vote on the recommendation to demolish the building? All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, thank you. Our second item is that the Heritage Advisory Committee receive the report that staff has provided on heritage permits under delegated approvals for 2022. Move in a seconder for that. Moved by Jan Saradis and seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Discussion of that, everyone has seen that. I think that we're going to have some discussion at some point about whether or not there should be some expansion or contraction of the rules applying to designated, that apply to yes, designated approvals, delegated approvals, sorry. So I think we'll come back to that then. So are we ready to vote, or any questions about this? Go right ahead.
I guess first of all, I don't know if I missed it, but we used to have these brought forward at every meeting, and I noticed that it says we're now getting a year end. Was that discussed at a heritage meeting prior to this, or? Is anyone aware of that? Does anyone recall anything? No.
I think it. I think they only come to the Heritage Committee, and I think they come on a sort of progressive basis, depending on how many there are, or you have to have maybe 2 or 3 to.
No, I thought we had a report on in the past on every time there was one between meetings, but now it's a year-end report. Anyway, I mean, I like the idea of a year-end report, but it would be, I think, worthwhile to be up to date on these, so it's not more than a year later that we're hearing about them. Like I say, if this was discussed before and I missed it.
I appreciate the point. Right now, there is a huge Facebook debate criticizing council for, voting down something that has never come to council, So I think that I understand where you're coming from here. Do you generate this report, Rob?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, so this, by doing a year-end report, this aligns with the way staff reports to council as well on other similar matters. I can't speak to what was done in the past, if it was done at every meeting or not. I don't think that is particularly problematic to do so, but there is that requirement to report to council at a year-end basis. So maybe it's just something that we have a process in place where we do that as well.
Okay. Specifically, Maggie and Dick's, which was more than a year ago. That's the first time hearing about this, that there was approval for an awning sign, and I just wonder if you can clarify what kind of awning sign that is, because I don't think it's been done yet. It's just a banner there now, and the plan actually encourages one type, retractable, but not other types of awning signs?
Yeah, through the chair, you'll see the awning is in quotes. So it's not as you just mentioned, kind of the retractable and that. And I think you're right. They just have a temporary sign up there right now. In terms of the timing for this, I'll, recall that there was an election and we had no meetings towards the end of the year. And so this is our first meeting. So it's, some of that timing does seem a bit later, but once every 4 years, this is the hiccup you get with year end reports.
Sorry, I thought this was in April of last year, right? That this was approved.
Yes, so it
Yeah.
would have been a year end report for last year, but we
Yeah.
didn't meet at the end of last year because
Right.
there was an election
Oh, I
and
see.
there
We
was no
should have heard
meetings.
about it sooner. Okay. Do we have any idea what kind of awning?
I don't have it in front of me at this time. Again, this is under delegated authority. It meets the sign bylaw. And so that's where the approval was. Again, I know that there's discussion that in the past where this advisory committee wanted to ask council to change that bylaw. And that's fine. It's a choice of council and the community. But I do not have the background available for these three with me because I was not expecting to have to run through what the details are of them. Again,
Okay, well, then we're kind of in the dark, I think, about a lot of these things.
Can I just quickly ask, does the sign bylaw conform to the heritage, to this document here? For our plan, because I think that's where we've run into problems before where something has been approved.
There are some suggestions, I believe, in the heritage plan, again, suggestions, but such as they're not codified in the sign bylaw. The sign bylaw is the sign bylaw and has the restrictions in there. I would not say that it is contravening that at all. It just is what it is. I do know that the advisory committee in the past has asked to see these kinds of permits, but it's not in your purview. So I might suggest under other business that maybe the committee wants to forward a recommendation or a question to council to change that. It's not about being in the dark. It's just not something that comes before this
Well,
committee.
there are two that aren't permitted under heritage. It says shall not be permitted under the heritage plan, which is so I don't know if there's a discrepancy there potentially between the sign bylaw and the heritage, but I mean, I guess we'll see on that, and I guess we can move forward on maybe changing the delegated authority thing. The other thing I just wanted to ask about was when it comes to painting brick, which was also in there. This was brick that had already been painted, which I understand we don't have a say on, but it would be good if an approval on something like this suggested, define the area. Just so that it's going forward, it's clear that the second story was unpainted. And while we had some discussion on this last time, painting brick does require a heritage permit, and basically it says should be avoided in multiple times in the plan. So I just thought clarifying that would be worthwhile as well.
Yeah, we've had some challenges, as you know, with folks that paint the brick. And it's something that I think would be valuable moving forward, that we have a bit of an information campaign with people that have heritage properties. Right.
Well, I'm sure with that.
It's one of those things that that people don't understand how damaging it can be. And a lot of times, great, you're sprucing up the front and it looks nice and all that, but not recognizing that it can have a long-term impact. And so that's noted, and I think that's something that,
And the plan actually says that unpainted brick does require a permit, like it's allowed potentially, but it requires a permit, so at least it would have to come to us or to.
Mhm.
Any other questions, Liz?
Sorry, Ross. I'm having trouble with the signage. That's kind of a bailiwick with me. I thought that heritage, when a sign was going to be renewed, replaced, reviewed, whatever, it came to heritage because it's in the downtown core in the Heritage District. And I realized that there is a staff decision making, and I believe the number is under 5,000. But in the cases over the last number of years, we've had, as you well know, because I think you came in when we were doing the value buds issue. And that one, we had talked about changing the colors, and he agreed that yes, the colors were not heritage. But that was a couple of years ago, I think, and so we're still stuck with that same mess. And then Maggie and Dick's, yes, they've been trying to replace, but I think there's a situation between the landlord and the renter. And in other areas, the same thing, but I think it all comes down to, we're working on a Main Street plan, which has a heritage component in it, and it starts at home. And I think we maybe should put this on the agenda for another meeting, that we have a say in the signs, all of them. Because if there isn't consistency and they're not following the plan, then we end up with the banners that are flapping in the breeze and the bricks are falling off. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of ruling about keeping them up to snuff. So can we maybe have a look at that in another meeting?
You know, I'd go on record. I think that the value bud sign is now exactly what this committee specified. So
Well, again, that was this council or this committee trying to recommend something that was outside of the scope of that discussion. You were trying to get them to do facade improvements that they didn't have. And again, I think if you're talking about signage, as staff, the only advice I can give is if you want to change that, is to forward a recommendation to council to change the delegated authority. And with that will have to come, the reasonings why, cost benefit analysis kind of stuff. And council will review that accordingly. It's not something that this advisory committee or staff can change, right? And we have no stake in the game as such, other than administering the rules we have, right? The member had mentioned color choices, and that there's nothing in our documents anywhere that speaks to what our defined heritage colors would be. So there would be additional work required with that as well. So all that stuff needs to be codified if you're going to hold people to that measure, right? But it can be done.
are there any other questions or comments? If not, I'd like to call the vote. All in favor of accepting the report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And item B, under items for information, we have a report from staff on construction activities and heritage permits at 26 Nelson Street East. And do you want to speak to that, Rob?
Through the chair, again, just note that we do not typically, we don't bring forward discussions dealing with enforcement issues and things like that typically, because they are matters between the parties and the municipality, right? We're dealing with legal matters. This one has not gotten fully to the point of a stop work order. It was done by another measure that the CBO has, in terms of in a letter format advising the property owner and the individual and corporation that's doing the construction activity that they had not applied for a building permit. Noting that this is one of only 3 buildings we have in the municipality that has both designations under the district as well as the individual building itself. We thought it would be noteworthy to advise the advisory committee that the action has been taken. And I think there are 2 particular things that are worth noting, is that the owner and his agents and that have been told that reminded that they need to have that that permit in place. They need to have a heritage impact study done to bring forward to get that permit. And in the meantime, there are some remedial things that they need to do in terms of the structure of the building. And also what's referred to as a fire watch, where they specifically do inspections of the building, a regular cycle throughout the week, and have to report back to the building official and the fire chief. Not only for the protection of that building, but given the changes that were done there, it potentially poses a greater risk to the neighboring buildings than it did before this unpermitted work happened. So that's essentially the kind of the full information I can give you on that. I can't go into many more details, but I think the advisory committee, eventually you'll be seeing these things come before you. And unfortunately, we have no control over people's choice of actions to not follow the rules, and some of these things happen, and they happen much faster than we can see it, especially if it's interior work. So
the important thing is that you have acted, and I think that I don't want anyone can speak here and should, but I think that we appreciate very much that everything has been done that could be done to protect, because this is probably the second most important building in our downtown core, and we are all anxious to see it repurposed and preserved. And other people like to comment on that, and just our thanks in bringing that to our attention.
yeah, I can just say that the professionalism of the chief building official and working in collaboration with the fire chief, both of them acted quickly, and also in a very thought out and reasonable manner, again, to drive towards compliance as fast and effectively as possible, while still having other tools available to them if it needs to be elevated forward. So they did an excellent job.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, maybe just one more thing. We want to make sure that these buildings do get reused, adapted. And the fire hall has been sitting there for a number of years now. And I think to see this work at least being started, we know that something's going to get started. And I think we should be very happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Are we ready to vote on this then? Accepting this report, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Oh, I beg your pardon. We didn't get it on the floor properly. So a mover and seconder to receive the report, Ms. Harris and Ms. Commissioner. And I think, do you want to vote again? Vote twice because it's important. Okay, that's accepted. So moving on, committee inquiries, and I think that we're going to lump a few things into this. Let's get started. Who would like to speak to this first? Oh,
I've got a couple of things. I had something a lot more elaborate.
yeah, Jim, can you put your mic on there? I don't think it's on. Okay, there.
I had something a lot more elaborate, but I spoke to Margaret, and she's given me some ideas to bring forward instead of motions. There's a work plan that I would like to suggest gets put on the agenda for our next meeting, whenever that is. I have something that I've already sent to the other committee members, a proposal that possibly could be included in our next meeting. Also, something else that could possibly be put on the next agenda would be terms of reference. I've also sent that around to committee members, and Margaret has a copy of the work plan and the terms of reference. And Margaret really set me straight on the rail shed. She's suggesting that I think this committee is in favor of trying to reuse the shed, to repair it, to get it back into some condition that it could be reused, adapted as the fire hall is going to be. So what Margaret has recommended is that the Heritage Committee recommends that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford ask the Heritage Committee and staff to prepare a preservation plan. So that could be a motion. I think I can ask Allison, could that be a motion then?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Sure. That the Heritage Advisory Committee recommends that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford ask the Heritage Advisory Committee and staff to prepare a preservation plan.
And sorry, just to clarify, was Margaret, did Margaret say that we're going to bring this one at the next meeting, or she's suggesting we will vote today?
No.
Okay, so I'm doing that for.
Okay, so we could discuss it at the next meeting. Mhm. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other things, questions, inquiries, Jen?
Through the chair, I'm just wondering with our property, I've got to look up the number again. On Highway 26, it's 205294 Highway 26. This property is in the process of having heritage designation. And I was just wondering, through the chair, Rob, where are we at that? Is that, I know that was going to the public for any any comments, not necessarily objections, and that should have finished probably mid-April, April 17th or so. And I know I'm sort of pushing you here because with the process, you still have to deal with it and then get back to the owner. But are we moving forward on that property?
Through the chair, I can get back to you with where it is. Matt is leading that. I know that he's been going through the steps since that last time, so it's not on hold other than just getting around to it, but it's moving forward. But I'll find out from Matt directly, who's the town clerk, where we're at with that, and we can bring that back as part of the report at the
I
next time.
appreciate it very much because the owner did ask for the designation and it's been, well, everything, COVID, everything, it's been a real drag out and it would be nice to have that sort of wrapped up. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Liz?
Yes, I think when I read the minutes of our September meeting, the last one, there were a lot of committee inquiries and a lot of things banged around. And how do we get answers to that, Rob? Is that, I know it was for our discussion, but there were some quite pertinent information going around. Is there a way that we can find a resolve to some of these questions, or how does, I mean, we have questions and we sort of bring them up and they go on the minutes, but then at the end of it, we never know what happens.
Through the chair, yeah, if I recall correctly, there were questions and discussion about a residence that's in the Heritage District that has been under construction for some time. I think that was one of the items, and then questions about did this body have an ability to address everything from the messiness of the work site to the changes being made. And I recall there was also, we informed you that again, similar or not dissimilar to the item we just talked about, the chief building official had to stop some of the work there because it was not following the permit parameters. So I know there was a lot of discussion about that. Off the top of my head, I honestly don't remember what else we talked about. So I think the short answer is if there are things that the advisory committee if it's things related to your purview that you'd like to understand, it's just about posing the questions. And like those ones, if they're going to be of the same kind of scale, we're probably going to have to come back with answers, right? Because that one we got into all kinds of everything from, you know, how the building code is defined from the province and all these kinds of things. As we know right now, the province is just undertaking changes to all things planning, Heritage Act, all that kind of stuff. So it probably just means, you know, putting something on the floor with a clear question, identifying what you want, and we can get the information back to you if we can't answer it right now.
We talk about working meetings, because I don't know about you, but I find this, you know, it's like 3 o'clock out of here at 4:30, and there's so many things going around because there's so much going on in the downtown core right now in the Heritage District. And so we all have all these little things going on in our heads. How do we get answers unless I bug you all the time and say, okay, tell me, do I make an appointment? Or everybody should really know about it, but I don't. We can't speak, we're not supposed to talk to each other. So I don't know how we get an answer. You know, you bring forward the agenda and we take it in, and then we've got all these questions which go in the minutes, and then we never can kind of sit down and chew the fat over it. So. Yep.
Through the chair, I'm gonna project that I believe that's what Jim is bringing up with the idea of a work plan. So, and I appreciate the passion and interest, and I'm sure you all know that, you know, the downtown and what's happening in the downtown is the Heritage District, but it's not the Heritage District. Those are like, they're overlapping, but they can be different, right? Because this advisory committee, for example, doesn't look at events that happen to be happening in the same space as the Heritage District, right? And you're here to be stewards of the district. So with that overlap, I can see how there's interest. In terms of speaking to each other, yeah, I mean, those are the same rules. You can't have quorum. You can't be passing around information, essentially conducting business out of quorum, because this is public. This is all about transparency. The rules of the exist is so that you are no more special or less special than anyone else. You shouldn't be conducting business literally behind closed doors. And that's what you do when you're like, hey, let's discuss it beforehand. It's clunky. Appreciate that. It's the same rules council works under and all other advisory committees. If you have questions that are specific of how we do things and that, you can always come to staff. That's fine. And particularly if there are these things where they are overlapping, but not exactly the business of the advisory committee. And if it is, me or other staff will say, you know what, we really should discuss that at a meeting, right? So we'll kind of cover that conversation for you and make sure that things are brought forward. But I do believe that that's what Jim is getting at with the idea of a work plan, because your committee is very much about advice on applications coming forward and passing recommendations. It's a very different kind of thing than maybe some of the other advisory committees.
I had a thought, just flew off, but I guess it had to do with the whole business of our priorities. The council is, I think, wanting to revise terms of reference for committees like the Heritage Advisory Committee, but we just aren't there yet. And Rob is, swamped with a lot of projects that we want to undertake, and he's trying to evaluate them in terms of the risks, the costs, how we get from here to there. So and that is a really tough one, but I think that if people on the committee can be patient, I hope that before long we will be bringing something forward in connection with revising the terms of reference for advisory committees that will be a little less complicated and a little less frustrating for people who volunteer their time and their talent and their experience and their services to us. So is there any further questions at this time? Oh, sorry. Okay. So Jan, go ahead.
Main Street, I'm afraid, Rob, I didn't make that meeting that you had. You're going to be managing that. I think it's great. Part of the idea of the Main Street program is the preservation of downtown. And when Rob brought it up at a council meeting, I was there, and I think it's a wonderful idea. It should be a real benefit for us. And there could be money involved, if I'm not mistaken, for preservation, and that could be incorporated into it. Would there be an opportunity for the Heritage Committee to have any input, to have maybe somebody on that committee as well, for advisory purposes, if not like as a voting member?
Through the chair, well, thank you for the opportunity. This is one of those things that they're similar but not the same, right? The Main Street program is we used to have it out of the Canadian National Trust as well, right? But that our side of it, on the Canadian side of the border, we just don't have that program at the national level anymore. In the US they do. It was through their national trust. It now is its Main Street America is its own organization. What we're talking about though is a methodology and being connected to a network of communities to do this. The Main Street approach was born in the 80s. There have literally been thousands of Main Street districts in hundreds and hundreds of communities with phenomenal successes. And it's about taking heritage or historic districts and having a methodology or a process, a system that drives historic preservation, economic vitality, and cultural vitality. And without getting too much into the details, essentially the structure is about transformational strategies based on 4 pillars that deal with all the things that make a Main Street or downtown effective. I will note that there are other organizations and some funding sources referred to as Main Street. I mean, it's a common phrase that have nothing to do with what we're doing. Right. So the Canadian Urban Institute, I think, has their Main Street program. That's just an ECDEV program that they have that they've branded Main Street. That's not what this is. What we're doing now, taking the Main Street model, is we're going to be working with the citizenry of Meaford to build up and give them essentially the framework and the skeleton of a nonprofit that then gets turned over to the citizens, and they can do what they want to do with that, again, under that framework. Some of the reasons for that is, again, thousands of examples of success. As a nonprofit, they can get grants without having first go through a very slow process of asking council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They can also give grants. They can work, let's say one of the differences with a BIA, which is a very tightly structured organization that can only do essentially 2 things. They can only promote the district of the BIA or do improvements on municipal buildings and lands that aren't part of maintenance. So additional things. So that's a very, very tight thing. And again, they can only promote the district. So they couldn't, for example, partner with someone who has a heritage building to help them specifically get a grant and a partner to make it real. Whereas this nonprofit, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, perhaps could do things like that, because it's not about that taxation district where everyone gets the same all the time. It's about being strategic at strategic times, right? So they might do events. They'll also do business development activities. There are all kinds of heritage stuff is in there as well. So it's a very robust and complex, well-proven system that we're trying to set up. In terms of the membership of a board, we're not defining that. So as we move forward, at first, it's going to be staff because we're the ones moving it forward. As every week passes, we're going to be trying to find more and more people interested. The good thing is about this, in a BIA, only those people being taxed by the BIA can be members. This, you don't even need to live in this town. If you love this downtown, you can be part of the Main Street organization. We don't know what that looks like yet. It might be a sponsor or a Friends of Main Street or what, like all kinds of different ways. So you can volunteer. There might be a membership dues thing to help pay for things, sponsorships, you name it. And so that also helps because the downtown is important to everyone, regardless of where you live, because there are things that can only happen in a downtown. Just like you can only do waterfront things if your land, it has waterfront, right? So downtowns are special. And so this opens it up and allows it to be special for everyone. What that membership looks like in the end, we're going to stand this up and it will be that membership that decides who is on the board. And so we've got a program that's kind of launching at the end of this week in terms of information, all kinds of opportunities, online stuff, in person, et cetera, for about a 10-week period. And then another 10 weeks or so of some on the ground kind of work, where at the back end of it, we're hoping we have enough members to have that nonprofit have an annual general meeting and an election of some sort where that membership does their thing. So that's the 7-minute rundown of an amazing amount of work that we're going to have to undertake.
Were there more comments or questions?
If you don't mind me, I said one more thing, perhaps on the next agenda, staff could explain the changes that Bill 23 has made on heritage. We were talking last year about a heritage register. That's not really going to be viable right now, but there may be alternatives. Perhaps staff could give us an update on Bill 23. Changes.
Through the chair, what I'll say is that we've got the date set aside for the training where we're bringing the heritage expert. We'll leave it to that gentleman to define that because he'll understand all the nuances about it.
I just add to that. I'm really pleased that this day of training on Wednesday, June 14th, will be for both members of council as well as members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. And there isn't any question in my mind that those of us on council need to understand the role of the committee much better too. So all very positive. Does that conclude the questions or inquiries? So go ahead.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering if the advisory committee volunteers would consider adding to Jim's work plan for 2023 a pamphlet for public understanding, something that simply states the boundaries and the considerations if you own a heritage property. And a simple one, we have resources in the committee that know heritage, that are writers, this kind of thing. I'm not saying we put together the pamphlet to be accepted. I'm saying we put the pamphlet together to turn it over to staff and would have some input. It would be more research that is not costing a staff member their time, which is in short supply, I think. But I'm just saying the pamphlet communication saves you so many problems, and it saves finance. It's direct, it's clear, and it's written in a easy public understanding form. So it's not all these technically things. It's just clearly outlining that if you own a property, these are the boundaries you have to work in this municipality or with the Ontario restrictions and everything else. I have a property like that. We were designated We had to be undesignated because it wasn't done properly at all the levels, and we couldn't move on anything. This is years back. This is in the late 90s. But communication, clear communication will solve so many problems. It takes away your problem of painting brick. If people know ahead of time, and these are owned by people, these are their homes, and they are putting the money forward, and they are taking the responsibility. So it just would be nice if the committee members might consider adding that kind of thing to the work plan for 2023, and maybe have discussion when that comes up at a meeting.
And I can tell you there are all kinds of vehicles that staff have to get information out. Like if we feed them the information, they will, I think, be able to get it into the public, scrutiny. So, anything else then at the moment? If not, I just go for it.
I just, can you just clarify what
Yep.
is happening in the peace work plan, and are we discussing this at the next meeting?
Is it going on the next meeting? And it's there for information, and that's what I understood anyway. It will go on. If we can add to it, and I'm just putting the thought out to you, think about it, see if you find it agreeable. Clear communication solves so many problems.
Okay, and I think that I hope that for our next meeting, as chair, I'll have some input to the agenda, and maybe we can incorporate some discussion of, and I certainly have not had an opportunity to thoroughly digest, some of the materials that have been brought forward, by committee members today. So I'm going to move on to the very topic of communications, and I just say that the committee will consider correspondence received by members of the public during each meeting. To share your comments, thoughts, or concerns with members of the committee, the public can send an email to heritage@meaford.ca. When emails are received to this email address, they will be compiled into a correspondence list, which is then distributed to committee members prior to the meeting. The cover sheet of this list will be included on each meeting agenda. I will say the contents of the correspondence list are not included on the public agenda to protect the privacy and personal information of those residents who choose to send in their thoughts and comments. And we have 3 items of communication today, and I just quickly list them. The 2023 Ontario Heritage Conference registration is open at this time, and you may want to discuss that. The CHO News Fall Newsletter and their Winter Newsletter are also in our correspondence. Anyone interested in attending the Ontario Heritage Conference? You'd be interested in that, Jim? Okay, we should talk about that and see. What I can tell you, it would appear until we get our new terms of reference that I will remain as the chair of the committee. And I am extremely busy, I won't be able to add much as I'd like to a conference like that. So I think it would be great if we are able to send one of our committee members to it. And so we'll discuss that further. Anything else under communication at this point? And if not, do we have a date for our next meeting, or we just know it's roughly a month to 6 weeks out? I'm asking you, Rob, on that.
Let me just see. So on the next one is identified as June 14th, which is the training one.
That's the training session, yes. And
Yes.
that's about 4 hours, mid-morning to mid-afternoon. And I think that it depends, I guess, on whether you have enough agenda items to add to that or move it on for a week or two beyond that. But so it will get a notice at any rate from staff. And before yes,
This training program, since it hopefully will involve all council and the committee, are we going to have it here, or will it be down in the terrace room, or has that been decided?
It'll be in council chamber, so it'll be here.
And there will be lunch. And it will be a good thing to get this committee together with council. The committee has talked about this all last year. And so thank you very much for arranging this, Robin. I think the instruction will be very valuable and especially to council. Because I don't think we've had any in the, even distant past that, okay. If there's nothing else, going once, twice, three times, you beat me.
Sorry. Next, this meeting, advisory committee meeting. We have a lot and on our agenda, we have a lot that Jim is going to put forward. I doubt, do we have a speaker coming on the 14th?
Yes, there's a heritage expert who's doing the training for us.
Great.
This is
So will that take up the entire 4 hours?
on that day, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so then can we schedule another?
There will be another meeting beyond this one. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff. I think we just, oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's my understanding there are several things coming to us for approval in the foreseeable future here.
Through the chair, I don't know. Because until an application is made, I don't know when like, for example, I would have thought there's an application on the fire hall because we told the owner a couple months ago, you need to get an application. And instead they turned around and started tearing things down. I can't speak on behalf of anybody on when, no crystal ball, unfortunately, it's not in the budget. So when things come, that's when they happen.
Okay, well, anything else on communication? If not, I'll declare the meeting adjourned and we'll see you the next time.